United States of America, a country that was supposed to be the wealthiest and most cutting edge, has fallen into misery. As a result of a banking crash and a constant political crisis, our economy has been in turmoil for 8 years. And our unpopular and indecisive president Herbert Hoover has so far done little to fix our situation. This has led to radical forces gaining popularity and growing in strength. Even more concerning for the government is that elections are arriving in 11 months. So, to try and change the course of our economy, Hoover was forced to reintroduce the Gardner-Wagner bill, which will launch unemployment relief efforts. It only managed to pass the Congress after granting concessions to the Socialist Party of America, granting them a boost in popularity. With it passed, the economy finally started looking upwards, but only for a few days. A banking crash in Germany spread all throughout the world, and with our economy already unstable, we took a massive hit. Still, the government didn't give up, and in the last few months before the elections, they managed to pass a new industrial act to kickstart heavy industry as well as funding new shipyards, both granting jobs to Americans. But with continued radicalization and the elections around the corner, the governing parties had no choice but to launch their campaigns and begin negotiations with other moderates. And so, 2 months later, the elections arrived, which means it's time for you, the people of America, to head to the polls and vote for one of 4 candidates. The 1936 American election have taken place, but while Alf Landon won the most votes, the elections have ended in a deadlock. The House of Representatives simply can't agree on a single person out of the 4 candidates. With paramilitary groups from each side growing tired and demanding their candidate to be chosen, there seems to only be a single answer to the problem: MacArthur. Several high-level officials, including members of Hoover's cabinet, are already backing the idea of him being appointed as chief executive. And soon enough, Hoover was convinced and decided to give away power to MacArthur. He did promise that as things would stabilize, he would give back power, but if he actually plans to, we don't know. Especially as things are not stabilizing at all. The radicals have grown far too strong, and defeating them now is too late. The first candidate to rebel against MacArthur was H. Murray, being sworn president in a sham election by old Democrat representatives. He has taken power in the southern states with the help of his militias. Only a few hours later, Haywood followed suit, calling the workers of America to rise up, and with support of several governors across the Rust Belt, he could secure the area. After that, Long declared the American Union state with a number of southern and midwestern governors joining him. And lastly, Landon fled to Sacramento and helped establish the Pacific States of America. We quickly sent a 30-day deadline to all of them to join back under the federal government and MacArthur, but expecting no one to comply, we decided to establish the Western Command Center with the goal of defending the West while we can defend Washington, D.C. While MacArthur and the High Command started planning war plans, we received an interesting offer which could change the course of the coming civil war. With Long and the Socialists having recently decided on a non-aggression pact, Murray reached out to us with a similar proposal. A plan which guarantees peace between us in 200 days as the civil war starts. So, should we accept the offer or not, and also which war plan should we prepare for? After a short discussion, MacArthur and the High Command had overwhelmingly decided to accept it and put forward a plan for the first 200 days to attack the syndicalists and try to seize as much industry as possible. With MacArthur in command, this is sure to be successful. But before the plan could be launched and the Civil War started, the rivalry between the army and the navy had to be settled. While MacArthur had at first planned to completely subjugate the navy and put it under the control of army generals, he had a change of heart as the risk of a navy coup became apparent. Instead, he simply managed to convince several admirals with the help of the Congress to stay loyal, and so the issue with the Navy was solved. With the 30-day deadline coming ever closer, none of the rebellious states stood down at first. However, we were met with a pleasant surprise when the two governors of New York and New Jersey submitted to pressure from Republicans in the state and allowed our troops to take over, kicking out the syndicalists. This meant we had two fronts against them, furthering our chances of success in the coming offensive. And that's when it began, the Second American Civil War. From all over the world, countries sent volunteers and guns to all different sides. Some countries, as expected, even took the opportunity to seize some of our lands. Canada took New England, which later declared independence, and Japan grabbed Guam. But we can't do anything about it. First, we have to clean up this American mess, beginning with the syndicalists. Our Air Force had already been deployed and managed to gain complete air superiority as we began our offensive from New York and Washington, D.C. Surprisingly, the syndicalists had little defenses set up on the front, and we managed to march into Pennsylvania uncontested in several locations. It went the fastest in the east, where we started to move around Philadelphia. Slowly, more enemy divisions started to show up, but having already surpassed the Appalachian Mountains, they had a hard time stopping us. Sadly, they managed to retreat from Philadelphia before we managed to encircle the city. However, this didn't help them, as a few of our divisions were already racing north to cut them off from Pittsburgh, and soon enough we had encircled 10 syndicalist militias. Meanwhile, outside the battlefield, MacArthur had managed to raise an impressive amount of our own militias in New York and New Jersey with the Federal Mobilization Plan. These won't fight the syndicalists, but instead man the front with Murray, as the 200 days of peace would soon end. Sadly, not all could be sent south, as guarding against the Canadians, which are supporting the Pacific government, has become a necessity. Back to the syndicalists, the encirclement has been cleared out and our sight has been set on Pittsburgh and Cleveland. The 200 days are over before we had the chance to destroy the absolutely massive encirclement, and we are now at war with Murray's army. This means we stand at the crossroad with multiple different attack plans. But we don't have the men to implement all of them, so we have to choose carefully. While some argued that attacking him or continuing against the syndicalists would be the best, with the threat of Pendergast's Missouri's Democratic Organization, it was however decided that we would take preemptive action against him in the form of a naval invasion. Before we could prepare it, however, we had to quickly deal with the 100,000 encircled syndicalist men, and also stabilize the front with Murray, but after that 15 of our best divisions had been freed up from fighting and sent to Washington to prepare. Under the command of MacArthur and the Navy already having established naval superiority, we launched the invasion towards New Orleans. At first it seemed to be unnoticed, but soon Pendergast's submarines intercepted us. This, however, was no problem, and we managed to destroy 2 of them. But as we arrived to New Orleans, we weren't alone. They had prepared for our invasion and had heavily guarded both New Orleans and Biloxi. While we did land around the 2 cities and even managed to capture Baton Rouge, all our efforts were futile. We decided to retreat as many forces as we could, but 72,000 men were left there forever. And meanwhile, Pendergast's forces have managed to push further east and west, but we can't simply give in that easily. While we aren't crazy enough to try again, we have already started to replace our losses. But which military plan should we focus on this time? While the option to naval invade Florida was the most popular, it's too late. And while attacking Murray could be the easiest, since he's even losing against the syndicalists. If we defeat him now, that would leave us in a 2-against-1 situation. So, attacking the syndicalists it is. Luckily, our forces, which have failed the naval invasion, are already ready to fight again. And it seems the syndicalists are tired, since they have tried unsuccessfully to take back Cleveland. So, it didn't take long to break through and follow the train tracks towards Detroit and Chicago. At first, the front was pretty weak, but soon additional reinforcements started to arrive. Not quick enough to stop us from capturing Detroit, but they did slow us down to eventually completely stop us outside of Gary, one province away from cutting off the lower peninsula of Michigan from Chicago. After taking a pause and resupplying our forces, we could continue, because for some reason the syndicalists hadn't understood that throwing their men against us wouldn't help. So after a short fight, the goal of cutting off the lower peninsula was achieved and we could turn towards Gary, the gateway to Chicago once again. After a long and tedious fight, we eventually managed to capture the town, but was greeted by 10 divisions guarding Chicago. But after all these massive losses and with our forces slowly moving around the city, the syndicalist militias had had enough and surrendered. So the syndicalists have been defeated, but otherwise things aren't looking good. The Western Command Center is having massive trouble and Pendergast is almost in Atlanta. Murray's defeat is inevitable, so instead of trying to save him by attacking Pendergast from Wisconsin, we will take the opportunity to capture valuable land from Murray. So let us crush one more traitor. We have done it. While Atlanta never came into our hands and Nashville neither, we have managed to force Murray to capitulate. This means only the Missouri Democratic Organization and the Pacific States are left to crush. While Pendergast has been the biggest threat, we might actually have surpassed him in strength, since we have put more of our factories on guns and artillery, and with MacArthur's incredible talent to recruit people, we have managed to deploy 48 new divisions. So our choices of offensives against Pendergast are many. Just like in the previous Civil War, we will march down along the Mississippi River to split their forces in two. But first we captured some free provinces where Missouri forces hadn't arrived yet, and managed to occupy all of Virginia as well as the capital of North Carolina. But we failed to capture any South Carolinian cities as their forces had already arrived. Meanwhile, Pendergast had launched a major offensive in the west to push us away from his capital. So far we have managed to hold it, but we need to start to put pressure on his forces, so we started our offensive. The first objective is to capture Nashville, the important supply city, but with constant attacks from the city itself we couldn't attack it straight away and had to move closer from the east. But soon enough we could attack the city and captured it after a tough battle. From here we continued south towards Huntsville, and despite constant attacks by enemy forces to slow us down, we eventually captured the city. The easy part is now over since we have to cross the Tennessee River. Well, we have already crossed it, but at the wrong location. Still, we utilized this to try and cross it at several other locations. Soon we had captured Memphis, but still not crossed the river in Huntsville as we wanted. That's when we noticed a gap in the front lines around Memphis and decided to fully exploit it. We were quickly marching to the Mexican Gulf through Mississippi, and despite a small defense in Jackson, we could continue. Soon we had arrived to the Gulf and had encircled large amounts of troops in Biloxi. They were easily killed and New Orleans was also captured a week later. Not only have we avenged the death of the troops who sacrificed themselves in Baton Rouge, but Pendergast's forces are also split in two now. We did immediately set up our navy to raid as many convoys trying to leave for Texas and started offensives to push all their forces out to the sea. Birmingham, the one in Alabama of course, was captured. Montgomery, no, not the general, and Pensacola also fell to our forces. Meanwhile, on the naval front we had sunk their pride of the fleet. Back on land, our forces had captured Atlanta but not burnt it down, and we were splitting the defenders into several small pockets. After most being cleared out, the two remaining were in Miami, which were either killed by our army or navy, and more than 10 militias in the Appalachian Mountains, which eventually were starved to surrendering. Pendergast now stands in ruins, while his capital is still under his control with more than 10 million casualties, and with even the weak Pacific states pushing against him, his days are numbered. After a quick discussion on how to end him the fastest, we decided to continue in the south towards Texas since he had very little troops here. We've done it. Pendergast has capitulated and the only enemy left is the Pacific states. But don't worry, they are our weakest opponents yet. With not even 1 million men deployed and almost half our industry, they are no match for us. We concentrated most of our forces in the south, where the Western Command Center had its stronghold, and began our offensive from there. While the terrain was the most difficult yet, with mountains and vast deserts, we did eventually manage to break through and capture several towns, including Grand Junction and St. Fe. Soon we had reached Arizona and its capital Phoenix. This meant we could attack both Las Vegas and move into California. With little to no divisions on most tiles, we eventually arrived to the west coast and encircled San Diego, as well as captured Los Angeles, one of the big Pacific cities. While we hadn't planned anything for our northern front, one of our generals had managed to encircle a ton of divisions in Dakota, including Japanese volunteers. But this won't matter much since the main fight is in California. On our way to Sacramento, their capital, we captured Fresno and encircled San Francisco, which we later also captured, and despite tries to stop us, Sacramento did fall rather quickly. With them already being 81% towards capitulation, we decided to simply attack everywhere to capture as many cities as possible and finally end the civil war. Our foes have been defeated, and we and the Western Command Center are the only combatants left standing. However, while you might think that the VCC would simply join us to finally unite the USA, tensions have risen between MacArthur and the two men in charge of the VCC, Omar Bradley and Dwight D. Eisenhower. They are nervous about giving unchecked power to MacArthur and are now insisting that he fulfills his promise of restoring democracy by stepping down and holding a special election. There are several ways we and MacArthur can react to these demands. Luckily for them and the US as a whole, MacArthur did decide to fulfill his promise and agreed to the VCC's demand. So they reintegrated and America was once again united with the Civil War officially over. But this war has left us in ruins and with much of the population still loyal to the traitors, an election can't be held immediately. Instead, martial law was declared with MacArthur still under control to root out radicalism and stabilize our situation. Our intelligence service was immediately sent out to identify and capture the agitators from both the syndicalists and the populist movements. To keep our officers loyal, as most are now out of jobs, we encouraged them to pursue higher education in universities. And that was almost all we had to do, with resistance towards our martial law shrinking everywhere except in the Pacific states. Our nation has been rehabilitated. The only question left is what to do with the traitors. Some suggest we eliminate them to keep them from ever destroying America again, but we have spilled enough blood, and they will instead be pardoned but kept under surveillance. It's now time to prepare for the elections. The three parties who joined forces in a coalition have broken up and are now holding their conventions to decide upon their presidential candidate. For the progressives, Quintin Roosevelt, the youngest son of Theodore Roosevelt, was chosen as a candidate. And for the Republicans, John Bricker, a supporter and successor of Hoover. Lastly, for the Democrats, Martin Dice Jr., a Texas Democrat. So, with every candidate ready for elections, MacArthur announced it on New Year's Day, stepping down together with the military as well as ending martial law. Before MacArthur stepped down, he also demanded Alaska and New England to be returned back to us. And surprisingly, New England accepted our proposal and gladly united with us. Canada did also return Alaska to restore relations between our nations. We will have to remember this kindness from the Entente as we choose our foreign policy. But first, context on what has happened around the world. The main thing is that the Second World War has begun with the Entente and the Reichspakt against the Third Internationale, Moscow Accords and the Co-Prosperity Sphere. In the Americas, Canada has solidified its rule over South America after a war with Brazil, but the Mexicans, members of the Internationale, are still untouched. For the Entente in Europe, however, things are dire. Portugal and Spain, as well as Ireland, Sardinia and the Netherlands have all been occupied, while the Reichspakt has managed to hold off and push the Moscow Accords in Russia and Sweden. They are having trouble against the syndicalists. On the other side of the globe, Japan, together with Mongolia and the Philippines, haven't launched any invasions yet. There are of course several more wars, but they are mostly uninteresting. While we clearly stand on the side of the Entente, the decision is now if we should bother joining the conflict or not. After a surprisingly calm election, despite some radicals boycotting it, the votes had been counted and were announced. And to no one's surprise, Quintin Roosevelt won, but no one expected such a landslide. This will allow the Progressive Party to pass legislation without any opposition. But before they can start to fully implement their ideas, we first need to begin reconstruction and deal with the political aftermath of the Civil War. While radicalism was brought down to moderate level before the elections, Klan, syndicalist and populist resistance is still widespread. And this is hurting us a lot, so we must immediately deal with it. Starting with the syndicalists by destroying their radicalism. But our progressive government are still sympathetic to their ideas and will adopt some laws to require higher worker control over the workplace. And finally, regarding unions, all loyal to the government were allowed to exist. Now, turning to the American First Party. Despite Pendergast deposing him, Huey Long has kept a lot of influence, and despite his populist rhetoric, we have decided to integrate his party into the Progressive Party, so they were able to win over many of their voters. Finally, regarding the Klan, we will crack down on them hard to fully destroy them and at the same time allowing African Americans to join society by ending the Jim Crow laws. So, with resistance now down to a minimum and the political situation fixed, we can turn towards our economy. starting by rebuilding our roads and railways to link up our vast country. After that, we subsidized businesses through massive economic investments with the goal of rebuilding our American industrial might. But as we started planning relief efforts for our farmers, we received urgent news from the Entente. The Reichspakt had collapsed, with France and Russia splitting Germany in two. This meant the Internationale could turn their whole army and navy towards the Entente. They have already naval invaded French Algeria and captured Tunis. But not only that, Mexico is invading Venezuela, and the Japanese have started their invasions of the East Indies. The Entente needs our help immediately, but with our army only consisting of normal infantry, we wouldn't be able to provide much assistance. Luckily, despite our economy not having fully recovered, it is massive and we have several options to improve the strength of our army. After considering several options, it was decided to develop medium tank divisions supported by heavy tank destroyers and further develop our infantry army. Sadly, our tanks will take a long time to research, develop and put into production, and the Entente needs our help right now. Luckily, this is why we decided to diversify and develop our infantry. Production of trucks has already been ramped up and 12 motorized divisions have started training in Texas. This will allow us to join the Entente and go on an offensive against the Mexicans straight away. After that threat on our border is dealt with, we can put our focus back on our tanks and plan for the next move. So let us prepare for our Mexican offensive and finally announce our foreign policy. While our diplomats were working on that, we received a message from Cuba, one of our only allies and friends during the Civil War. The message, a call to arms. The Socialist Republic of Haiti, a member of the Third Internationale, had declared war on them. Refusing this request would destroy our reputation, and despite our motorized not being ready, this means we have to join them and the Entente in the fight against syndicalism a bit earlier than expected. But don't worry, the Mexicans are even less prepared than us. We have our whole infantry force prepared and they have only a single division. A few days after joining the Cuban War, Mexico and the rest of the Internationale joined in. So Quentin Roosevelt announced a shift towards war economy and limited conscription, with more to be expected. And lastly, our armies were ordered to invade Mexico to stamp out French and British influence in America. Only a few hours after our infantry had crossed the border, our first strategic victory was reported. We had cut off Baja California from the rest of Mexico, leaving it unprotected. On the other side of the country, another victory was reported. That one Mexican division on our border had been encircled and destroyed. While all this happened, on the rest of the front, our infantry had managed to capture massive swaths of land without resistance. Soon, however, Mexican divisions started arriving, but not to worry. With our forces still outnumbering them and they having gaps in the front lines, we could encircle the newly arrived divisions and crush them. Soon we had arrived to the outskirts of Mexico City, and this was when some actual resistance started. They even managed a local counter-offensive. But this resistance wasn't enough to stop us, as we managed to capture Leon and Guadalajara and then start our offensive to Mexico City. With only 2 divisions guarding it, the city quickly fell to our hands. This was the end for the Mexicans. Despite some international troops arriving in Veracruz to defend the important cities, our units managed to encircle it, and with our navy raiding any forces trying to flee, we managed to capture the city, forcing the Mexicans to surrender and inflicting our first casualties on the British and German syndicalists. After now having been at war in more than 60 days, the paperwork of joining the Entente had finally caught up. So at last, we and our Cuban allies were in the Entente. We immediately joined their war against the Japanese and prepared offensives together with our new allies. With Caracas almost falling, we sent over 10 divisions, and hopefully destroying this Mexican naval invasion won't be difficult. As our first forces arrived in the city, we immediately started our offensives and we were surprisingly successful despite the unknown terrain and climate. But our beginner's luck would soon turn. As we arrived to Merida, the front had become so small the international forces could concentrate their defenses, and with a surprisingly strong local supply they held off our attacks. Continuing our attack won't help, so let's turn towards Haiti instead. Our marines have been trained and are ready to launch their first ever naval invasion to the island. Supported by our air force and navy and with surprisingly little resistance, the invasion was a massive success. Capturing their capital and all of Haiti and then continuing and liberating the Dominican Republic. So, having cleared up almost all international holdouts in America, we have to decide where to turn next. Sadly, our limited navy and few marines won't allow us to go on offensives against the and the syndicalists at the same time. So we have to choose carefully, but our options are many since our navy together with the Canadian is the strongest in the world. While most admirals supported an offensive against the Japanese, this wasn't enough to convince the army, which put its focus on the British Isles, forcing the navy to agree on attacking the Brits. The plan is quite simple. Our 10 marines will naval invade Ireland and then wait for our infantry and tanks to be developed. Then the invasion of Great Britain can begin. Our spies had already been sent to Ireland and our marines have begun preparing in Newfoundland. The only thing left is that we need naval superiority. While our main fleet doesn't reach all the way to Ireland, our submarines can escort our marines the rest of the way. Since with no British ships in the area, escorts aren't needed anyways. So we launched the invasion. 2 weeks later we arrived on the western coast of Ireland. The first goal was to capture Galway and its port. An easy objective since the British only had a single garrison guarding it, and with our far superior numbers we could attack the city from all different sides and capture it. We now have to capture the 3 other ports on the island to stop the British from reinforcing it. Splitting off a third of our marines headed for Cork, another third for Dublin and the rest to Belfast. They all had garrisons stronger than that on Galway, so it was a bit tricky to capture the port, especially Dublin where reinforcements had started to arrive. However, capturing every province around the cities and then attacking from different sides allowed us to capture the ports and inflict heavy casualties on the British. The most being in Dublin where their new reinforcements weren't organized at all and didn't manage to flee. Ireland is now fully liberated and we can start to prepare for our invasion of Great Britain. By building up infrastructure, sending over our infantry and our air force, and lastly waiting for our tanks. It will take 100 days for them to enter production, but this means we have time to focus on our internal politics. Our government had already done a great job at supporting our farmers and are currently on their way to reform the Federal Reserves to finally fully heal ourselves from the Civil War. This means our government can start to implement their election promises, starting by introducing a wealth taxation to fund goods for the people since prices have risen due to the war. After that we started encouraging the country life movement to get people moving to the countryside, and we also started discouraging alcohol. Our tanks had now entered production, but we had some more time to reform our country, mainly with the long anticipated introduction of fair labor standards. While slowing down our economy in the short term, it will help our workers stay healthy and motivated to work. And finally, we began reforming our education system to make it more available to everyone. That's when 4 tank divisions were finally deployed and shipped to Ireland. So we started preparing the invasion of Britain. We will head from Dublin to Liverpool and then immediately ship our tanks and motorized over so we can blitz through the UK. But before we launched the invasion, we received news that the Russians had declared war on the Japanese. This is greatly appreciated since the Japanese have even invaded Australia. So let's now invade the UK. Unsurprisingly, they had divisions in Liverpool, but we had prepared for this. By landing around the city and then marching to Manchester, we could cut off any supply to Liverpool and easily kill all divisions. With the major port now secured, we sent over our tanks and motorized. Before they arrived, Canadians launched a rebellion with several pro-King forces rising up in Wales. This helped us distract British troops as we drove to the east coast. With our quick motorized, it didn't take long and we split the country in two with a massive encirclement in the middle. From here we simply continued attacking on all sides. Sadly, due to supply problems, our tanks were quite useless in the beginning. For example, after arriving in the outskirts of London, we tried to enter it but got kicked back. But this was mostly due to the lack of supply, since as we attacked them in Cornwall, we easily broke the British forces, only losing a single tank, and started attacking Portsmouth. Despite being outnumbered, 2 of our tank divisions managed to encircle the city and capture it. After that, Dover was captured and the only city left was London. After slowly wearing down their defenses, the British syndicalists surrendered, leaving the French left as the only major in the Third Internationale. So, before they can reinforce their coastal defense, we will plan and launch our invasion of the country. Our navy has already established complete superiority and our air force is bombing the important defensive infrastructure as well as supply. Our marines will land in Brest, the biggest French port, and then the rest is simple. So, being completely ready, we launch the invasion. We've done it. The European syndicalists are crushed and the Third Internationale is dissolved. We now have the tricky task of redrawing the European borders on our hands. Sadly for our French and Canadian allies, not their African colonies. Since as the syndicalists took over the continent, they let the African states declare independence. This sense of freedom will be impossible to destroy now, so let's stick to Europe. Ireland has gotten its island and the British as well as the French governments in exile can start their process to desyndicalize their countries. The same with the Spanish, Portuguese, Belgian and Dutch. We are only left to decide over the German, Italian and of course the Mexican lands. And we have several options what to do with them. Mexico is simple, we have met quite a high amount of resistance, so we will set up a friendly government so they can rule over their own internal politics again. In Italy it was decided to give away all our land to the Pope so we could finally unite Italy again. And in Germany we established a republic and held an election where surprisingly they voted for the restoration of the monarchy and the SPD. So with Europe redrawn we can turn our army and navy towards Japan. While most of their war effort has been turned to Russia, they have still managed to capture almost all our allies' colonies in the East Indies and they have even landed in Australia. The first step will be to kick them out of the country and we have already started preparing. 4 of our tank divisions have been sent over and a supply hub has been built to support an offensive. Thus, while our European troops including our important marines get shipped to the west coast, we can already begin our offensive actions. With few, weak and unsupplied Japanese and Filipino divisions, it wasn't difficult for our tanks to simply drive through any defenses and force them to retreat. Townsville was easily captured and we could continue into the rest of North Queensland. We tried to drive all the way to Darwin, the last Japanese port, but with supply running low we had to stop. Instead we will capture it by sea as our marines arrive and our navy is repaired. It took a rather long time to wait for that, but in the meantime our scientists had started construction of a nuclear reactor, which would allow us to develop a superweapon to shorten the war. Back to Australia, it's now time for our navy and marines to do their job. Not only will it be the first time we fight the Japanese navy, but it will also be the first time we use several of our new ships. But we don't have to worry. Due to the lack of raw resources, the Japanese navy has had a hard time to replace their losses against the former German navy. Now to the naval invasion. Not only did we attack Darwin, but we also headed for Timor and some other Indonesian islands. We landed everywhere and the Japanese in Australia were now encircled and without supply. So together with some Australians we captured their troops and freed all of Australia. A great success, and with naval superiority everywhere we can continue to the Dutch East Indies so we can head to the Philippines and Japan. And we have no time to lose, our Russian friends are bleeding troops, the longer we take the more die. The Philippines are defeated and the road to Japan stands open. So we launched our invasion of Taiwan and the Ryukyu Islands at the same time, with both managing to defeat the local Japanese garrisons and secure the islands. The only thing left now is to invade Japan. It will be difficult, but so far everything has gone perfect. The plan is to do it with 14 marines landing in Nagasaki and Fukuoka and then capture all of Kyushu Island. Then, as we have secured the airport on the island, we will threaten the Japanese with our soon-to-be developed superweapon. So with our marines ready, we launched the invasion. As the first 4 of them arrived, they met heavy fire both from land and from the sky. But since the Japanese garrisons hadn't fought in battle before, and with another 10 marines arriving, we managed to land on the island. First in Nagasaki and then Kokura and Fukuoka. All Japanese troops were now cornered to the sea and disarmed as they didn't have anywhere to retreat. After another week of fighting, the whole island had been captured and we sent our threat to the Japanese government. If they didn't surrender now, one of their cities would cease to exist. Unsurprisingly, they thought we were bluffing and refused to surrender. And they might be right, since we haven't been able to gain air superiority at all. We will have to capture some more airports in the region while we wait for our first nuke to be developed. We first tried to cross to Shikoku Island but failed due to 3 tank divisions on the other side. So instead we will turn to the more radical option, naval invading Korea. We would be able to capture an airport and begin to fight against the Great Ming, which we have to defeat nonetheless. With 7 marines we managed to land in Busan after only a short battle. The Japanese hadn't expected us at all, so we could easily continue towards the airport. As we arrived to it, 10 of our tank divisions had also started their journey towards Korea. We tried to continue towards Seoul but got stopped and had to wait for our tanks. However, our goal had succeeded. We had managed to gain air superiority over Japan, and as we finish our bomb, we will drop it as fast as possible. Though our tanks had the time to arrive in Korea and start an offensive before that. They were impossible for our enemies to stop, and we even managed to overrun some of their divisions. It didn't didn't take long until Seoul was captured and we could continue to Pyongyang. While we got slowed down due to bad supply, as the supply hub in Seoul was brought up and running, we could continue at the same pace and capture Pyongyang. From there we continued towards the Ming, and with almost no division stopping us, we captured Shenyang and Port Arthur, both important cities. That's when we got the news that our scientists had fully researched the nukes. While air superiority had turned, we managed to cross to the island this time and capture the airport, turning the air war towards us again. So we ordered our air force to launch humanity's first ever nuclear bomb on Osaka. The Japanese nation is in complete shock. That, together with our naval invasion, has finally led to Hirohito admitting defeat. Surprisingly, the Ming surrendered as well, since the Russians had slowly made gains and us threatening their south. So we had done it, the co-prosperity sphere is defeated and we are finally at peace again. The peace deal was quite an easy one too. Russia got all their lands as well as Mongolia and China, while we got to decide over Korea, Japan and the Philippines. We simply established democratic states in each of them, but gave away Taiwan to the Guangzhou federal government. And that was all. We have spread freedom to the world and saved the Entente from the Japanese and the syndicalists. Our job is done and we can start to focus on ourselves again. Quentin Roosevelt has succeeded with his reforms. Everything from social security to food stamps has been implemented. So I thank you for your votes. Without you we wouldn't be here and the world would be a syndicalist hell. And thanks so much for watching until the end of the series.